We've been listening to this audio clip almost all night, and I've listened to it 100 times. We want to show you what the audio clip says is from inside the aircraft. It's not exactly a distress call, but it does give you an insight into what's going on in the airplane, and then more specifically what it doesn't say at the same time. Let me give you a real quick recap before we jump into this audio. On December 18th, 2025, around 10:15 a.m. out of Statesville, North Carolina, that's about 2 hours, and the aircraft crashed after just under a 10-minute flight taking off from runway 10 at Statesville. They were in marginal VFR weather, the aircraft got into distress rather quickly, and you can tell that from the ADS-B data. Now we've got confirmation via the audio. It sounds like the co-pilot in the aircraft, whoever that was, and we'll unwrap that in a minute. Whoever that was makes 3 distinct calls, and we've got the recordings now of those 3 calls. The NTSB said that there was no distress call made for this aircraft, and technically they're correct about that. There was no formal distress call made. Thing like that takes place. It was made on a Unicom frequency, because Statesville is an uncontrolled airfield. And so the frequency that they would have taken off on is the one they would have stayed on, and they're making a traffic broadcast is, "'Cause we're having, as they say over and over again, issues, let's listen carefully to this first recording." Traffic citation 257 Bravo Whiskey, we've got an issue with. Okay, let me stop it there, Statesville traffic, so that lets you know that he's on the Unicom frequency. And whenever you're in an uncontrolled airfield, you always preface it with traffic. So you say Statesville traffic, or Charlotte traffic, or Raleigh traffic, or wherever you are. You say your call sign? All right, Cessna 257 Bravo Whiskey, we've got an issue with. He's going to use this word issues several times. Listen. We've got an issue with some of our things, so please don't take off from runway 10. Okay, so he says we've got some issues with some of our things. What those things are, he doesn't say. We don't know yet. There's been a lot of conjecture about it could have been an engine failure. That's still a player. It could have been a cargo compartment came open and luggage came out. That's definitely a possibility. It could be some sort of flight controllability problem. There's been a history with the citations. We simply don't know exactly what it was. And unfortunately, this broadcast doesn't help us with that, and I want you to listen very carefully to the voice of the person that's broadcasting. To my trained ear, this is a younger voice. This sounds like a young person. So he should have been at the controls. If that's him on the radio, he's got an awfully young-sounding voice, just in my professional opinion. Sounds like a younger voice here. He says, we've got some things, so please don't take off from runway 10. He's just giving a heads up to anybody out of Statesville. Because these guys have decided they're coming back and they're going to land on that same runway. He continues, listen carefully to what he says next. We're having some issue here. We're going to try to circle back around and land. Okay, here's what I hear. I'm saying we're having a... Alright, and then he says we're having some issues here, we're going to try to circle back around and land. Oh, he's already given you the intentions. Now several other people that have analyzed this thing have said they hear rough engine instead of some issues. We're having some issue here. I've listened to this 100 times and I don't hear rough engine. I just don't. I hear some issues. I think he's saying it one more time. And again, I'm trained to listen to scratchy radios. I've done it my entire life. I'm pretty good at picking out what is actually being said. I hear this young voice saying some issues. So then, what do we know from this so far? Was no formal distress call made, and the NTSB was correct about that, and they said they were not aware of a Mayday call. The difference between Dennis Dutton, a retired airline captain, and his son, a student pilot, is very dramatic, and whoever's talking on the radio sounds pretty confident about what they're saying, but again, the terminology is lacking. There's no specific Mayday call, there's no specifics on what's going wrong with the airplane, but if they were talking to, let's say, air traffic control in Charlotte, air traffic control would have come back immediately and said, state the nature of your emergency. All qualified pilots at that point at Leighton, I have an engine failure on the number 2 engine, and my intentions are to come to Charlotte for a full stop. I've heard on this channel many episodes where that took place. This person is broadcasting on a Unicom frequency, and they're just kind of giving a general audience a general overview, that they're coming back, what their intentions are, and that they're having some issues. But I wish he had said specifically what those issues were, but he didn't. And we're still left with, was it an engine failure? Was it a configuration issue? Was it a combination of both? I still think it was some combination of both. It's very likely that there was something going wrong with an engine on this airplane because of what happens at the very tail end as they're turning around and coming back to the airport. But I'll hold on to that, so let's listen to the second clip now because there's more audio. Let's listen to this. Right now we're working on getting everything done. We're getting it down. Okay, so now he says we're getting our gear down, and they've already turned back. If you're looking at the ADS-B data, they're on their way back into the airport. It looks initially like they lined up for runway 10 and for some reason didn't like it, and that's not something that got broadcast to us. That's just conjecture on my part. They start out to make what's called a teardrop, and a teardrop looks like, if you see the shape of a teardrop, it's bigger at the bottom and it ends up at the same place at the top. They're going to turn out from runway 10 and try to reposition to come back to runway 28. If you compare the turn they made when they were turning out initially when they took off, that's a very long, lazy, wide turn. The turn that they're making back to runway 28 is extremely tight, and the NTSB at some point says that they were stable. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, what I think they meant by that. There's a lot going on there. But at this point, whoever's talking on the radio, most likely the co-pilot, and let's just assume for a minute it was Jack Duck, Dennis's son,